Okay, she was first. Yes.
Where did you start thinking all of this good stuff? 'Cause I dig what you're saying, and I'm saying, where did this
Let me, I want to do it in order. I'll do that real quick, but her first.
I want to address the situation where Switzerland is neutral.
Right,
That makes a huge difference.
right.
In our perception, in country's perception of them as an entity, and we are part of America.
Right.
How does that make the California position, because we're not neutral, to be the next generation of negotiation?
Yeah, great question, great question. The Swiss are not neutral because they're a neutral people. They made the decision to become the global negotiation center, and then they made the decision to become neutral, and they made the decision to have international banking secrecy laws, all because of the same package. Originally, they were a civil war fighting type people, and then through a series of steps, they moved in to become neutral. When they initially became the global negotiation center, they were a state of France. France gave them what's known as subnational sovereignty, where the military and the dollar remained intact, but all of the other policy decisions, negotiation, immigration, banking, moved to Switzerland. That was good enough for the world. So when Switzerland took on this role, they were still linked to France by the military and the dollar. That's why it's called the Swiss franc, because originally it was the French dollar. So if we make a similar move, we don't have to be, we can still be part of America and yet still have enough credibility to move forward, because that's what the Swiss did.
I'm intrigued to see where you started this thinking, and then secondly, second part of the question, would it be possible unless we get rid of the two-party system?
Okay, so first question is, where did I get the idea? And the
I'd like to see
second
your
part is
smile,
the...
because Nikita Khrushchev said you're on your way out, America, until you get rid of the two-party system.
Let me take the political question first. This is completely apolitical. So I'm talking about half taxes and half bureaucracy. That's a traditionally conservative idea. But I'm also talking about improving every single public school in the worst neighborhoods up to world-class standard, and improving all of our infrastructure, roads, bridges, dams, up to first world standard. Those are traditionally liberal ideas. So I'm selling a package of ideas, and it doesn't neatly follow into either party. If California moves on this, you may still have these parties, but they will be so heavily morphed by having to deal with more national issues that they've never dealt with that it's difficult to say how it appears in the future, because the government of California would have to take on responsibilities it's never taken on before. And that would force both the Republicans and the Democrats to have to look at issues they've never looked at before. So I'm not exactly sure what it would look like. In fact, how it's going to look like would be up to the people of California. I'm only here to get the seed out, to get the idea out. What exactly this looks like is a discussion that 36 to 40 million people are going to have. And it's kind of a rough answer to your question. The other one was, where did I get the idea? Okay, so about, what was it? On the eve of going into Iraq, you saw on CNN and MSNBC, they go, new poll, 70% of America supports going into Iraq. Okay. 5 minutes later, same channel, new poll, 70% of Californians completely against going into Iraq. War is the biggest decision that any society can make. And on the eve of this recent big decision, the people of California had the exact opposite opinion as the rest of America. So I knew something was there. I'd always heard Californians are different. I traveled a little bit and I've heard this concept. We're the land of fruits and nuts, right? I've also worked in government at the liaison level between the state and the federal government. We have a dirty joke that I've worked in state government for 12 years. We have a dirty joke that we tell at the state government level, and that's that, hey, we put way more into this pie at the national level than we ever get. So do you remember a couple of years ago, a section of the bridge in the Bay Area just collapsed and fell on a trucker and he died? We saw that and go, oh, wasn't that project we were asking for money for? Oh yeah, too bad. By the way, Minnesota got $200,000 for their freeway that's already better than ours. And they go, oh yeah, ha ha ha. It's just a joke. We pay way more than we've ever gotten into the system. Everyone that works in your state government knows it. It's just considered, hey, we're the whipping boy. And I go, hold on now. we don't act the same, and we don't get a fraction of the amount of money we pay into, how long has this been going on? And I found out 30 years. We're milked about, if you add everything up, about 70 to 100 billion dollars more than we ever get anything back. Which, by the way, is more than it takes to run the entire state of California. And, you know, there's a difference of opinion. So maybe the financing has something to do with the difference of opinion of the people. And I looked into it, 200 pages later, here we go.
We have such polarization on the parties. Are you a Democrat, Republican, and are you a Jerry Brown who's somewhat same theme, visionary, and are you in tune with this philosophy or not, and why?
To be quite honest, I haven't followed most of the recent political issues in the last 2 years. I've spent all my time on researching the book and putting it together. And again, I want to repeat that point. If I was a liberal or I was a hardcore conservative, what I'm talking about is shifting this state over to a new economic model where we have tons of jobs and we're recession-proof. That's independent of party ideology. The ideas discussed in this book, no Democrat, no liberal, no Republican, no conservative has ever brought up. Any of them ever. So everything in here is brand new. I don't exactly know how parties would look at it. But I do know that everybody who's interested in making a greater California, whether or not they're Republican or Democrat, because all politicians are ambitious, would be interested in at least exploring the ideas in this book.
And Jerry Brown?
I really haven't followed him enough to give you an opinion one way or the other. If you had a specific thing on a particular policy of his, I might be able to.
Yeah.
Any other questions? Yes, please.
I'm just curious, of, you know, how this kind of thing would work as long as California still wanted to remain a state. Now, if we wanted to cede, which is maybe possible, I could see this thing that California might work on its own, but we're a United States, a republic of, you know, 50 individual states all having a unity and yet independence. But I don't see how you develop an independence and still maintain the unity as part of the United States. It kind of baffles me there.
Right. Okay, so what I'm talking about is a radical change for California, but one that's limited to just California. So in the book, I go into the reasons why California and Hawaii, but 48 other states can't pursue this at all. And namely that's the legal reasons why California became a state. So the US government had existing relations with California, recognized the government there, and then militarily invaded them. That's the history of California. That's not the history of 48 other states. Typically a state, there was a territory, people move into it, the population grows, they petition for statehood, and then they join. So under English common law, there was a term called terra nullius. And I'm not arguing morality, I'm arguing legal precedent. Under terra nullius, which is what allowed every English-speaking people to occupy any part of the world that they did, it said that if the land's not developed and you go there and you develop the land, then it's yours. So Native Americans didn't get to own any land, but people who moved in and built an orchard did. If you were already a recognized government, and then you were made into a state, you've violated the principle of terra nullius, which is what allowed all of America to be built. Secondly, if you didn't go through the statehood petition state, then you've violated the way that you've joined the Union, the way that 48 other states have. Now that seems a little theoretical, except that British legal scholars have already talked about how California has an argument because of these historical reasons. And the foreign ambassador of Russia, when he came to California in Silicon Valley 2 years ago, also said that they were willing to support the legal case for this. It's a legal case that's limited only to California and Hawaii because of those two reasons. Existing government, then invaded. That's not the way the other states were joined. So the Union stays intact. The second part of your answer. is that we would pursue subnational sovereignty, again, as Switzerland did when they made the move. Again, the military and the dollar stay intact, but all other policy decisions move to your capital. Now, I know that seems radical, but a couple facts. Scotland, in the last 5 years, and I mean these last 5 years, has done this exact same move. Scotland for 400 years has been a colony of England. All the decisions were made in London. In the last 5 years, these last 5 years, through a series of votes, they've moved almost all the way to independent, except for those two key differences, the military and the dollar. Just to throw out a few things, the economy of London and Holyrood, the capital of Scotland, has actually grown, even though they've technically been pulled apart. And the Queen of England herself just gave a commendation to the Royal Scots Highlanders 3rd Division for their valor in Afghanistan. That's after independence. So those two key things they've been getting commendations for, and they have a great deal of strength. Even if it seems strange, here's the other key thing that we don't talk about. Subnational sovereignty is a form of government that is rare, but it's found in 25 countries around the world today who've had this form of government for the last century. These governments are found literally around the world, meaning they're universally applicable to any culture. They're stable, they have growing economies, they're democracies, and they've been around for 100 years. If you go back another 100 years, there's another set of 10 to 15 countries that have followed this form of government. So rare, but stable and found around the world. And we have a very recent example of a first world English-speaking country pursuing this. And by the way, the worst thing that happened when they had these debates was some harsh language. The Prime Minister of England came to Scotland and said, "This will be the end of the Great Britain." Well, that was 4 years ago. Great Britain's still there. So I would say that we would look at the Scottish model.
I would, just to comment, I would guess that New Mexico has the best possibility of this kind of a system because of the system of government in New Mexico provides them with probably of the 50 states, the best opportunity to cede from the United States of any of the other 49 in terms of how it was created and what the options that they have as in the Constitution of New Mexico. So I just a comment.
I'm not that well versed in New Mexico, but I can say with the legal precedents that I'm talking about, how you have to develop previously undeveloped land, New Mexico wouldn't apply. Because when they were given the statehood, they were largely undeveloped. There were some people who were called New Mexicans, and they had a few cities, but they were extremely small. There was no road network, so you could still argue that terra nullius and traditional state absorption apply.
Sure.
Any chance of Moraga getting its own?
Loma Linda.
That's actually been brought up. I've done 3 speeches at different Libertarian Party chapters, and they're very interested. You would have a return to local control like you've never seen before, and here's why. If Sacramento now has to take on a whole bunch of new responsibilities, they're not having time to traditionally deal with the issues they've taken away from the counties. So a lot of the things that the counties think are very important would probably be kicked back to the counties, meaning that you would have the ability to decide a lot of things that affect your life at the county level, like you haven't seen in 50 years.
Couple of things before you leave.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.